As a new Black Clover chapter releases, we continue to wonder what Yami's fate will be moving forward. With this recent chapter, we're given details on the state of Yami's body, thanks to Gray. We're told his body has changed, and that it's almost like the devil that's possessed Asta. Physically, he's all torn up, but he's brimming with magic. That's left me and many within the Black Clover community to speculate what could happen to Yami and his fight against Lucifero. As you all know, the chapter begins with Gray healing Yami. Afterwards, we see William give him a new sword using his World Tree magic, and is given the name Mistletoe Blade. After, we see Yami bring up how he's still not over what William did in the Elf arc. Despite that, he accepts the blade. He then says to himself that he'd like to have a drink with William if they manage to make it out of this alive, which, to me, almost feels like a death flag, which I feel Yami's been getting quite a bit of since he's been captured. Anyways, we continue to see Yami fight against Lucifero, with Noct appearing telling Yami to leave. This leads to Noct saying that he'd rather see himself die than Yami. That's when we see Yami convince Noct to live on and to protect others. That's when we see Captain and Vice Captain prepare to fight against Lucifero, leaving a great way to end the chapter. Now normally I would give more detailed explanations regarding what happened within the chapter itself, but I feel like I did that when I talked about the leaks. Plus, this video is more so talking about a few theories I have regarding what could happen to Yami next. Particularly 3 theories that I have that I want to bring up. Of course, there's many different things that could happen, and I've seen many of them brought up on Twitter, Reddit, various different social media websites. These are just 3 that's come to mind, and I've brought up and discussed with other people on my Twitter, and I thought they'd be worth bringing up. Of course, like I said, they're just theories, so there's no way of knowing what could happen next. They're just fun discussions we can have while we wait for the next few chapters to release. And with that out of the way, let me bring up the first theory that I have, which is the puppet theory. I brought this up in my previous video, but to summarize, I believe that what Yami has inside him, which is similar to the devil that Asta has, I think it's, somewhat of like a parasite. I had a theory that it could work similar to Meducula's curse magic, where Lucifero could take that opportunity to control Yami and use him like a puppet. That way we can see him turn against Noct in the middle of their fight against Lucifero, and we see Yami try to fight against him, and maybe even the Black Bulls, which could lead into a really emotional fight where Yami isn't able to control himself and he tries to kill the Black Bulls, which would make for a really emotional moment. Having to see all the Black Bulls having to stop Yami would really hurt to see, and as if they don't already have enough trouble, Lucifero's still right there. So of course we could likely see Yuno and Mereoleona continue to deal with him. Maybe some of the other captains can get back up and fight. Meanwhile, everyone else is trying to deal with Yami. Of course, once this is all over, I believe the Black Bulls will manage to find a way to stop Yami and break him out of Lucifero's control. That's where I feel like Tabata could take advantage of us thinking that things are alright, and then Lucifero can show up and try to deal one final blow to Yami, killing him off. Because I believe in the next 2 chapters, that'll be the end of volume 32. Then we move on to what would start the next volume. So having to end in a way where I suppose either Yami dying or making it appear like Yami would die would be one hell of a way to end a volume. Of course, like I said before, it's just a theory. I know one thing that really goes against it is that some people believe that, well, not some, but I know one person told me that it's too similar to what Meducula does, so it could appear redundant having to see someone control another person like a puppet after what we just saw with Meducula. So that's like one thing that goes against my theory. Another thing that could possibly go against it as well is the fact that we don't know whether whatever Yami has inside is either enough or even capable of having Lucifero control him. We know Lucifero was able to control the lower ranked devils when he arrived in Spade. He had them come together and make that giant worm looking thing, which got sliced in half by Asta. It could be that that only works towards lower tier devils, or it could be that it just doesn't work on Yami at all. Or some conditions are met. Maybe he doesn't have enough, quote, devil within him to be controlled. Or maybe Yami would be too powerful for him to be able to do anything like that. There are many obstacles that could be in the way for it, so it's possible that that could not happen at all. That brings an end to the first theory. The second theory I want to bring up is a drain theory. The drain theory pretty much leads to the fact that whatever Yami has inside him allows Lucifero to drain out his mana. As we saw within the panel itself, Yami was quote-unquote brimming with magic. We saw the mana flow out of him, so Lucifero could take advantage of that and drain his mana as they continue to fight. Plus, we still don't have the gates open, and I believe Lucifero could still use Yami and William to try to open up the rest of the gates. For all we know, William could also have what Yami has, which is like having some form of a devil inside them. I know that Morris said before that he didn't need Yami and William anymore to open the gates, but Morris isn't really here right now. And I don't even know if Lucifero is capable of opening the rest of the gates without them. So it could be that Yami and William's rescue was really only temporary, which allows Lucifero to take advantage of whatever's inside them, then finally open up the rest of the gates, which in turn would kill both Yami and William, which would come to a shock to many people, because I know when it comes to figuring out whether Yami or William will live by the end of this arc, most people seem to agree that William is done for. He's just gonna die by the end of the arc, and I partially feel the same way as well. But when it comes to Yami, it's always split. It's like half of the fandom thinks that he will die, and the other half thinks that he'll be fine by the end of it. And there's many arguments to be made for both sides. But if this drain theory of mine comes true, that means that both William and Yami will both die by the end of this arc. Maybe even within the next 2 chapters, we could see a cliffhanger of Yami and William being captured by Lucifero, and having him finally finish the job of opening the rest of the gates. Or maybe like a huge tease where he has both of their bodies and he's preparing to open the gates. Something along those lines. It's also worth bringing up that Lucifero hasn't even completely manifested yet. So that could also bring up the idea of him needing to drain Yami and William. Maybe the more he drains him, the more complete he becomes. Maybe making it easier for him to open the gates without them, or making it easier for them to use them to open it later. There's quite a few possibilities when it comes to what Yami and William have inside them and what Lucifero can do to use them. But that brings the end of the second theory. The third theory I have is the most interesting one, I think, but also the least likely, which is Yami's grimoire being possessed by a devil. The devil, of course, being Lucifero, as that would bring in a huge advantage of having to take over his grimoire and maybe even control Yami himself. I think the problem with this theory is the fact that in order for this to happen, Yami needs a 5-leaf grimoire. And for that to happen, he'd have to fall into despair. We saw that with Patri in the flashback in the Elf arc. So I can't really imagine Yami falling into despair and having his grimoire change, unless there's something that Lucifero could do to have them take over his grimoire without Yami having to fall into despair. I mean, Lucifero is one of the 3 rulers of the underworld. He might be capable of doing things that normal devils can't do. Maybe he's able to make himself a host into Yami's grimoire without having to do much trouble. With Zagrid having to do it, it could be because he's a lower ranked devil, so for him, things are just much more complicated. But with Lucifero, well, he's no Zagrid. So him being able to use Yami's grimoire as a host could be possible without Yami having to fall into despair. But I would wonder how Tabata would be able to pull that off. I feel like that's just not possible. But it would be one way to end a volume. Just to see Yami fight Lucifero, and then by the end of it, Lucifero just catches him off guard and uses his grimoire and turns it into a 5-leaf. That's where we see Yami feel so helpless, and all the Black Bulls, the captains, and especially Charlotte, having to just witness in despair as we see the captain of the Black Bulls fall under Lucifero's control. The volume ending like that would be absolutely insane, and I would love to see everyone's reaction to that, not just here in the West, but in Japan as well. That would bring in a lot of discussions and probably cause BC spoilers to trend pretty high. But of course, it's just a theory. There's no way of telling what Lucifero is going to do against Yami, and what Yami is going to do against Lucifero. It is really cool that we see the chapter end with both Captain and Vice Captain having to work together. I really wanted to see an interaction between the two, but I never imagined we actually see them fight together. It's going to be really cool to see what techniques they come up to try to fight against Lucifero. There's a lot they could do. Using shadow magic and using dark magic together, That's one hell of a combination. So I'm expecting Tabata to give us some really cool moments between the two in the next chapter. I'm really excited to see what he does with that. Especially with the art. Oh my god, what could he possibly do with dark and shadow magic together? Oh, I'm really excited to see that now. But yeah, that brings my discussion to a close. I presented to you guys with 3 theories that I felt could happen. Of course, none of them could happen. But I still felt like sharing. They're just cool ideas I had in my head for the past few days. Feel free to let me know what you guys think. Let me know what your theories are, what you think could happen, whether you enjoyed some of the theories I left here, whether you're pretty critical about them. I'm open to any discussion, as always. So feel free to let me know in the comment section or on Twitter. Either one is always fine with me. Until then, here's looking forward to the leaks, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace out, everyone.